Star Wars Jedi Survivor is here, and again, devs are releasing Day Zero patches to address performance issues. In this instance, the developer has gone as far as posting a public apology on Twitter. It reads, "We are aware that Star Wars Jedi Survivor isn't performing to our standards for a percentage of our PC players, in particular those with high-end machines or certain specific configurations." Even before Star Wars Jedi Survivor came out, it's public knowledge that there were a ton of behind-the-scene patches that reviewers had to download. Our critics work really hard to keep up with patches so that the review reflects what gamers will experience on day one. But that's a moving target that's hard to hit. So Steam users who are playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor are now bombarding the game with mostly negative reviews. It's gotten so bad that EA has even released this statement. Now, this isn't the first time it's happened, and if we look into the future, there's also been some controversy about Redfall running at 30 FPS on console and requiring always online. Guess what? The developer is already telling us there's going to be a patch that's going to address the 60 FPS issue on Xbox consoles and also remove the always online requirement. Why does this keep happening? We've all seen the Assassin's Creed memes where there's basically no face there, and I just didn't understand how this keeps happening time and time again. So why did devs let this happen? The long and the short of it is they don't sound super happy about the process either. It all seems to come down to certification.
That 0-day patch, once you get over that horrendous cert, that 0-day patch, they will cert in days because they want it as well. Everybody wants to have the best experience for players. And I think that's the thing that players need to understand.
That's Chet Falazek. He's worked at Valve. He worked on Portal 2, Half-Life 2, Left 4 Dead. He knows what is going on behind the scenes and why these performance issues happen.
The short answer of your question is this is all logistic.
This is Marie, who works at publisher Pop Agenda. She's a co-founder and, more importantly, release manager, so she has a good idea how the pipeline works.
You know, there's dev, there's marketing, there's porting often, there's certification, and there's everything that is publishing, like the release management for like storefront publishing. There's like little things that you can do to make sure that like everything is good. But at the end of the day, like I said before, there's so many steps and people involved, especially in the titles you mentioned. There's so many people involved that it's almost impossible to be perfect.
And really, for players, you should want this. And I can go over why you want this, because you want to be playing the best version. And we've just changed how we approach making games, right? We update games all the time now, right? It's something you can do all the time now. So developers want to do that. They want to be able to give you the best thing. They're talking to their community. They're hearing things. They're hearing about little things. They're like, oh, that's easy to fix. We should fix that.
So why the Day Zero patch?
So you have to pick that date. That means you have to ship that date. You are saying 6 months out, we are going to ship that date. Now, 6 months out, your game's probably running at 20 frames per second for something else. Like you have not put perf forward because you've been like, we'll solve perf later. The big thing we need to worry about is is the game fun? Because nobody's going to care about perf if the game's not fun and they don't like it. So, okay, that's what you got in your head and you're working on it. You go to this march, and what you're not marching for that date. You're marching for dates ahead of it. So what you're marching for is the first really big date will be is you can send it to cert.
At Pop Agenda, we recommend between 8 to 10 weeks between the certification submission and the release. But we're talking like 4, 5, 6 weeks. So while we're doing that, the main dev team might have been like working on fixing bugs for whatever reason.
But your first cert, your big cert, can be months or a month, excuse me. And during that, you're going to find out that you accidentally, we were encrypting communication. Like, and you're like, what? What are you even talking about? Like you're getting nailed for bugs you have no idea about. It's not bugs like, hey, this game crashes. It's bizarre stuff, right? And then that gets done. And then you're like, okay, now we got to send it off to go get made to a disk and be put in a box. That takes some period of time. In that period, like Xbox will send you, I think they call it a green disk. And that's the disk that you can take home and put it into your console and it will work. And it's for you to test. But that's the first time you get to take what you've created and put it into a system that you're actually going to play it on. Now, if you find a bug there, they're already making disks. So you're stuck. And you're stuck with all of these bugs that you want to fix. But now you've had to wait for certification to be done before you could really kind of make a new build. You are going through the process of making the boxes and the discs. And then you have this weird point where, I don't know if this is how well this is known, you pay stores to put it on the shelves. But like, that's the nightmare of you're looking at like 2 months.
Chet and Marie, interviewed separately, agree on those points. And basically all the responses we got kind of outline the same situation. George writes, takes months to get past cert. Sometimes devs put out a date in the public / mandated to come up with one. The base game might get past cert without insert one big feature, and that secures their committed date. But now they have to put insert big feature in the patch. In a purely digital world, development can continue until certification needs to start. Physical discs and cartridges often require months of lead time. Pretty much everyone is going to answer the same way. You have to pass certification weeks and weeks and months before launch. Does that mean you don't keep working on the game? Of course not. Crystal writes, sometimes we don't know something exists, it's a unique issue, and we can only hotfix it when we know it exists, i.e. cropping up on day one with high volume of users. 10 more weeks. It's that simple. You allocate 4 weeks for certification and 6 weeks for manufacturing. So by having a day one patch, it gives you 10 more weeks to polish.
We always want our master to be the best as a tool. You have like a bug that is, we call it often a must fix. So an MF. So you might have an MF and you're like, oh, this is so tiny. So let's just ask for a waiver and promise a day one patch. So it's not a way to go through QA, right? Certification is compliance purely.
You got to think, first of all, you have to pick your release date. So you are picking your release date and saying, hey, 6 months from now, normally, we're going to be on store shelves. You have to do that because you've got to work it out with Best Buy still and GameStop. For the people who still buy that way, even though most people buy digitally now, or more people buy digitally, you still have to think, if you're going to make a box copy, this is what you have to do. This is the cost of having a box. Where they're actively developed the game, they're playing the game, and now they have this thing of the cert. Now for cert, you can, for perf and cert, you only have to be at 30 frames per second, let's say, right? So that's why when perf stuff in particular comes at 0 day or later days, it's because, hey, we thought 6 months ago we could hit it this date. And we did hit 30 frames, and we could go through certification that way, but we couldn't hit 60 frames, and that's what we really want because we think that's the best experience. Now, that's on the console. On the PC side, you've probably made a custom version of your engine, or you've made some changes to it. And NVIDIA and AMD, they're like, hey, yeah, we'll fix that bug. Don't worry about that. We'll ship that. We'll ship that before you launch. They ship it the day you launch, right? They up their drivers. Now, you're working on beta drivers, sure. But they're not shipping those drivers to everybody else to day 0, day 1. So you really can't have that wide breadth of testing on every system until that day. So it's like this whole big set of stuff. But if you think about it, none of it's about being evil or trying to be cheap or trying to game or play gamers in some negative way. It's always about like, how can we get you now once we've locked in this date, which is why retail, I never want to ship another retail game in my life. Once you've locked in that date, how do you get the best game to people on that date? And then how do you update it after? And that's what you're seeing a lot of now is people are getting to ship date. They're getting it to pass cert. They're getting the really horrendous stuff day 0, but they're like already on our roadmap. We know the things we need to do, the things we wanted to do at launch, and they're just not ready yet.
If you've encountered all these things that you notice, why wouldn't you just make sure it's past cert and everything, hold off on printing the discs, and just like push your launch? Like, why not just delay launch until you've got a near perfect version of the game?
Because you have to ship. You have to ship it someday. And you have to ship. And again, the problem of being in retail is you've got to pick that date 6 months ahead. So it's 6 months earlier. They're like, oh yeah, this is working out. This is going to be cool. And then they find something along the way. You will find the stupidest stuff. Left 4 Dead, the weekend before we put to disc, we realized it was too big to put on disc. Chris Green, one of the engineers, just stayed up all weekend writing a new file system for that game. Like, that's the kind of stuff you find that is just like, oh, your expectation now isn't, I bought this game, it's never going to change. Your expectation now is, I bought this game and it's going to get better over time. But I think the weird thing to me is online in the community acting like that team is trying to pull something over or be negative versus like they are working their butt off to make you the best game they possibly can. There are people who have been working years on that game. Like, people have poured a lot into the game. And so they want to make the best possible game and they want to show it in the best possible light. So like none of these are easy decisions and none of these were made lightly or to be negative to the players. There's no money in 0-day patches.
Okay, but what about all these games that are coming out that don't even have the game on the disc? Forza Horizon 5 is one that comes to mind.
Because discs suck. First of all, you can't fit the whole game on the disc, and it's gonna be like, do you remember before we went to DVDs and we were on CDs, and you would get like that like 30 CDs for your game? Like that's some of it. It's just the games are gigantic. Those games are beautiful. That's just the pain in the ass for them. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to handle that? And I think that's just one way they counter that.
Star Wars is a really good example. It's like 100 gigabytes. It's insane how big these games are getting. But that's a whole different topic. So does that make these day 0, day 10, day 20 patches feel any better as a consumer? Not particularly. I just want to sign on to Star Wars and lightsaber some stormtroopers. But looking at the dev side of things, I've learned a lot and I can be a little bit more understanding about the needs that they have. Still don't love it, but it doesn't really matter what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. We can keep this conversation going. And for more on all things gaming, keep it right here on IGN. By the way, before you go, be sure to check out the on record video that I did like this and let me know what you think about this format. I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now, everybody.